So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay?
Well, listen here.
Hello, and welcome to 90 Day Fiancé Classic Edition. I'm Mr. O, and today, Ms. H and I will be discussing the Season 1 tell-all for Happily Ever After. In this episode, we get to hear about how much sex Melanie and Devar have. We hear how hard social media can be from Lauren. We discuss Powell's last name change. Brett does some more rapping, and Kyle and Noon are there, but it's really mostly the Danielle and Mohamed show, and a lot happens with them. Since it's the last episode of the season, we'll also end with our power rankings. We'll be back again on Monday to discuss the new episodes, Happily Ever After Season 5 and The Other Way Season 2. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Okay, stay tuned and enjoy.
Hello, Mr. O.
Hello, Miss H.
How are you?
I know. Glad I finally have time to do this second podcast in a week.
Oh, I know, right? Well, speaking of which, I think Love After Lockup is starting in a few weeks. So I don't know if we really want to start a new season of Classic, if that's the case.
Yeah, we probably won't. You're right. Because it is July already. Wow.
It is July. I know. Crazy.
I know. I feel like the first couple months moved so slow in quarantine. And these last ones have been, I don't know, coming too fast.
Right. But, just in general, summer always tends to go by very quickly for teachers and students.
Right.
But maybe faster for teachers.
Right. So speaking of things that went by quickly, is most of the couples in this tell-all.
Yeah, absolutely. Except for this really was the Danielle and Mohamed show.
It was. I mean, it wasn't even the Danielle show. It was like the Mohamed show.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like even their segments were mostly him. So
him talking about her.
I know. And talking about her. We're going to just go through all the other couples kind of rapid fire before we get to them, because we do want to mention them because they were on the show.
Yeah,
and, I don't know.
They
did have some interesting things. So
yeah.
I'm going to start with Brett and Daya, who I feel like of all the ones I was supposed to cover this week were on it the least. So Brett and Daya were technically on the show. They chime in on some other people's stories, like Daya's issues with social media, Brett's much, much lower libido than Devar, and Mohamed generally being an asshole, which everybody chimed in on. Then they end the tell-all with Brett's cringiest rap yet.
Oh, God, it was the worst.
And that was it. So I can't decide which it is. Is Brett completely devoid of self-awareness or self-consciousness? So, like, to say another way, does he think he's actually good at rapping, or does he just not give a fuck that anybody thinks he's bad at rapping?
Okay. Like, Brett, I kind of take as being that typical stereotyped engineer, right? I think he's aware that he's not that great. I think he even made mention of it when he was recording his rap stuff for Daya. I think he's just kind of one of those guys who's like full of dad jokes. Like, he doesn't give a crap, So I think he's aware, he just doesn't care. That's what I was saying. I was like, so it's either, do I feel bad for him because he just doesn't know? I mean, I think he thinks he's better than he is in real life. Okay, yes, that's true too. I do think there's some of that going on. But I don't think he actually thinks like, "Ooh, I could make it as a rapper." I think he's like, "No, I'm a middle-aged white guy. This is good at rapping, but it's fun. It's fun to do." Yeah. But I do kind of admire his not giving a shitness of being able to go on live TV, to national TV and be like, "You know what? I don't care." Yeah, because it was fun. Pretty bad. Oh, it was really bad. It was really bad. But I think even he knew it was bad. He didn't have that rehearsal down. He didn't have rhymes for everybody. He was like, Yeah, but speaking of embarrassment, someone who does care about what other people think was Daya. And I do kind of feel bad for her. And I feel like because, guilty when it was her first season when she was on, we were all kind of like, "Oh, Daya, you're so terrible. Like, why did you demand all of these things when you first got here? Why did you think your ring was fake? Why did that even matter?" Mm-hmm. And now she's saying that her family is judging her and she's had to cut people out of her life because they've been so judgmental. I feel bad for her because it's like a television show, and I feel like they were on early enough where I don't know if people really got that the show just makes everyone out to look like an asshole.
True. I mean, I still don't think people get that, but because hers was different when she was talking about social media. Everybody else seemed to be talking about, random strangers on the internet, but her was like, no, people I knew were like, oh, I didn't know this about you. I can't believe you did these things that I saw on TV. And it's like, well, that's not like real. Like, I know it's called reality TV, but I feel like not just this show, maybe it's the audiences, because the people who are watching probably on tapes from the Philippines. I don't know if they have the same style shows where it's reality in heavy, heavy, heavy quotes. Like everybody, I feel like knows like this is not who these people really are.
Yeah,
at least
I
hope
feel
they
like
would. Jeez.
That's true, but I feel like even the argument here, and you kind of hear this even with this franchise, and you hear people say this, yeah, but you still did X, Y, and Z. Like, yeah, you may have had a bad edit, but if you don't give them any material, they can't make you look that bad. And so I kind of feel like a lot of people will still kind of defend, the reality part of that, saying like, if you were an angel and they never caught you doing anything terrible on camera, then how can they give you a bad edit? So there's still some reality to it, is what I believe kind of the general audience.
I mean, I buck up against that. For some things, yes, Danielle throwing the notebook at Mohamed. Yeah, she actually had to throw that notebook at the notebook or whatever she called it, file folder. I don't know what it was. You actually had to do that. But there's plenty of stuff where if they take something you said 5 minutes from now and bring it back and make it the first response, you look like a huge jerk.
Oh, sure. Like splice it a little bit differently. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Agreed. But I think that's why people kind of still think of it as reality. Like even here, it's like, it's very much part of like the TV culture right now is reality shows, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of feel like a lot of people think like, oh, well, it's so produced and it's so edited. And yeah, those people probably are a somewhat character or caricature version of themselves, but it's still them at the end of the day. And I think that's how the general population kind of views these shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least that's my take on it.
All right, who's next?
Moving on to Noon and Kyle. Noon starts off by saying that Kyle is exactly the same, and he hasn't changed since they met. We get a recap on Kyle's mom, and Kyle says that he's just done worrying about or thinking about taking care of his mom. They briefly show Kyle and Noon in Thailand. Kyle now knows how to say hi and thank you, and Noon says, yep, that's enough. Noon's dad is doing better because he stopped smoking and is exercising more. Imagine that. Those two things could make you better. Right. Kyle says that he can relate to the sacrifices that the foreign couples have made on the tell-all, and he really actually likes Thailand. Sean quizzes him on his newly acquired Thai language and asks him to say a bunch of stuff. And, Kyle obliges. It kind of sounds like he's talking Thai, but, who's to verify except for Noon? They say they are in the U.S. for a few months, so Noon can keep her green card. Okay, so this doesn't really have much to do with the content of it, but at one point, Mohamed actually accused kind of his side of the couch of being drunk. And then when Kyle was like kind of talking after that, I was like, huh. But then Kyle says that he was jet lagged. So do you think that Kyle was jet lagged or drunk on this show?
Interesting. I mean, it didn't seem. I didn't think about it till you said it. So jet lag seemed to go into it. He did seem super uncomfortable. Like that's definitely true.
Yeah.
But I just kind of put that down to Mohamed being such a teetotaler, right? Somebody who never even sniffs anything. That is like, if you had a beer before you came on, he'd be like, "You're drunk. I saw you drinking the drink and they're drunk now. You with the drunkitude." That's where I just chalked it up to. He's like, oh, they clearly had backstage drinks. And now he's like,
oh,
everybody's
but come
wasted.
on. Like, Mohamed drank a beer on his first season. Remember, with his rando football friends?
Oh,
so
yeah, that's right.
I don't think he is completely a teetotaler. I feel like he probably does look down on people who get drunk. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he would judge people who had a drink as long as it was in moderation and you were still in control.
Yeah, but as soon as they started criticizing him that's out of control. Now you're out of control.
Absolutely. True. But there was definitely, I felt like something off about Kyle. You know, like I kind of felt like just his eye contact. And so this kind of goes back to what you were saying, like maybe he was just uncomfortable. But I kind of felt like he spoke up at random times, like almost in a somewhat confrontational but not trying to be confrontational way. And then but then when asked direct questions, it was almost like kind of like he was staring down in his lap. And it was, I don't know, just kind of odd behavior.
No, and now you say it like that, I can see what you're getting at. But it just at the time when I watched it, it just struck me as nerves, honestly.
Sure. And the thing is, too, is I know Kyle was a bartender. It really didn't talk about, Kyle's relationship with alcohol at all. But you'd almost kind of feel like if he has lived with his mom being alcoholic, as severe of an alcoholic as his mom was, or is, and Kyle living with that and being like traumatized by that, it just seems to me that he would avoid it altogether.
Yeah, but that's not usually what happens. Like,
that's a cycle.
It's super common for people like who grow up like that to become alcoholics themselves. Like,
absolutely. So it did make me a little worried, given all that information. Like, is Kyle drunk?
Which is weird because, like, why would he come after Kyle specifically? Because Kyle wasn't saying anything to him. I don't know. It was weird.
But that's what I was saying. Mohamed just kind of went after everybody on his side of the couch, which included Kyle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All
right. So, what was I going to do? Lauren and Alexi.
Yes.
All right. So this is a couple that did have a turn, but not much happened and it wasn't very long. We hear about how stressful the wedding was for Lauren to put on without her friend Sarah, who was disinvited at the beginning of the season. And they talk about Alexi's relationship with Sarah. Basically, he's cordial to her, but he doesn't see any need to develop any kind of relationship. Then we get to Lauren's struggle with announcing her Tourette's this season. She said it's harder to tell people that you're close to, which is why she struggled so much telling Alexi's family. But she's glad that Alexi's family now is on board and knows, and she doesn't have to hide anything anymore. But she also talks about how hurtful the people on the internet were during her first season, and how she felt like they treated her more like a character on a TV show than a real person. The rest of the cast generally agrees with this sentiment, and then they pretty much wrap up. So to get the conversation going, because this is the second time we've talked about social media.
Yeah.
Does or should Sharp Entertainment give some kind of media training to the cast? And,
absolutely.
And shouldn't it include never read the comments? Which clearly many of them do not abide by.
Yeah.
Plenty of evidence for.
I don't know. You know how it is. I kind of feel like, and this has definitely come to light more so, I think, just with this quarantine, people do not like being told what to do. And if you are restricting their rights, it's like they feel like that's un-American. You can't do that, And so I cannot imagine what the contract would look like if you were forced to kind of put your social media on lockdown. I mean, I think they're trying to do that as it is right now, but then to tell them, oh, okay, here's some social media training, ignore all comments. I can't see them having the kind of control that would allow them to do that.
No, I wouldn't. I guess there's a difference between training and like locking it down. Because I was thinking more like what the professional sports leagues tend to do, to be like, hey, listen, you're going to be an NBA player and people are going to be paying attention to your things. And this is what you should do to make sure that things don't come off wrong. And this is what you want to do to make sure that your brand is protected. This is what you want to do to make sure you don't get into argument, like things like that kind of, sell it as because all these people care about their brands. They want to look good. They want to make it, they want this to be their big step. And it's like, well, guess what? If you get in a bunch of fights with a bunch of randos on Instagram, this is not going to be a step. This is going to be it.
That's actually a really good point. I do think they could all use social media coaching.
Yeah, so coaching, I guess, is a better term.
Coaching, training, either or, like they need it. Because I feel like it's kind of rare that any of them comes out as like looking much better. And I would say one thing, someone who is really good at this social media thing is Anfisa. Here is an example of someone who didn't get a good edit And by all accounts, everybody should have hated her. But the way that she handled herself on social media actually worked in her favor, and she almost has a following now. Now, granted, it's not everyone.
Right, because she doesn't get into fights with people, right? She will respond and clap back at people on social media.
Absolutely.
But that's it. But once she claps back once, she's not going to engage with them again and get into a long thing. It's like a stupid one-liner, get out of here. Because it's like none of these people have ever heard of a troll. This person doesn't actually believe what they're saying. They're just trying to get you to respond and freak out. And you responded and freaked out. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. People just sometimes want to get people all riled up. All right, so moving on, we have Melanie and Devar. So we open on Melanie and Devar's very active sex life, which we find has to do with Devar wanting it 3 times a day. Oh, and the fact that he never bikes, which means his penis is bigger. Melanie thought that with Devar working, he would want sex less, but Devar says sex is a stress buster, so he actually wants it more. We find the relationship between Bev and Devar hasn't quite improved, but they're cordial. We then shift to Devar's family and money. Devar says he was never trying to hide his sisters from Melanie, and it was more of a scheduling thing. It ends up that Melanie is paying $35,000 for Devar's schooling, or at least that's what it appears, and Devar doesn't consider that a debt, but an investment in both of their future. Melanie clarifies that it's really just a student loan. Devar tells us that he attracts women all the time at his old job and on social media, and that he is with Melanie because he genuinely loves her. Okay, so if you recall, I don't believe it was on This Happily Ever After, but I think it was the first time he met Bev, and Bev was asking him how many girlfriends he's had.
Right.
Devar claims he has never had a girlfriend before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or he's like, maybe one? I don't know. Okay, if you were to ballpark it, how many different women, do you think Devar has slept with?
Ooh.
Because obviously this guy cannot keep it in his pants.
Yeah, we're combining the fact that, he's super horny all the time.
Yes.
With the fact that while he was working at a lifeguard in Jamaica, as we 100% surmised, he could get pretty much any woman he wanted to that was at that resort. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how long did he work at the resort?
But he claims to have only had one relationship, so I feel like...
he hooked up a lot. I think we knew that too, right?
Sure.
Like that's how the relationship started with Melanie. Like, it's not like they had a long courtship. They just were like, what's up?
Yep. You're into it. I'm into it. Let's go. Yeah.
Right. Which is fine if that's what everybody's into. Great. Yeah.
As long as you're on the same page. Sure.
Yeah. As long as you're on the same page and everybody knows what's going on. That's great.
Yep.
So it's a lot. Because even 1 year is 365 days. I'm not saying it was one a day, but
I don't know. I feel like it could have been one a day.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah, but then there are probably some repeat customers in there too.
Oh,
the reason why I say one a day is if he's trying to have sex 3 to 5 times a day. Like, I don't know. Like,
well,
you have to have one a day, right? Or at least try.
You could. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot easier. It's different.
He works in a resort too, like in the tourist industry, as he puts it. And so that's definitely different because I feel like, people have like vacation mindset. Oh, it kind of reminds me of 50 First Dates, that Adam Sandler movie where he definitely tried to prey on the tourist types because it meant that he didn't ever have to commit because these people were going to be out of town in a week. They would leave. Yeah.
So yes and no, but even as easy as it was for him to pick up women working at the resort, it's still less difficult than rolling over in bed and just like raising your eyebrow.
And be like, hey, now it's happening.
Well, now that we put dinner in the oven, we have 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's much easier to get 3-4 times a day when the person is always there with you than having to like go find somebody and feel it out. And, because I'm sure there's going to be women who did flirt with him a lot and then it didn't go anywhere. Like, that's not what they were into. They didn't want that. And so that night didn't happen,
Right. I'm going to say high hundreds. Like high hundreds. So not quite 1,000, but maybe in like the 700-800s-ish ballpark.
I mean, if that's what he was going for, sure. I don't know how long he worked at the resort, but yeah, that could totally be true. Unless it was like, definitely over 100.
Yeah, because he's like, what? My math is kind of calculating like let's just say conservatively, he started having sex at 18, right? He's like, what, 26 when he met Melanie, I want to say?
Sure.
26, 28, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's like almost 10 years.
But then, because the other thing too is your repeat customers are throwing you for a loop here. Because yeah. it was probably more like one woman a week, multiple times with that woman during the week, but like one woman a week.
Okay, but that's still, okay, granted, but that's still 50 a year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
For 10 years, that's still 500.
If it's 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
Basically, the number is whatever he wanted it to be, is what we're getting to.
Oh, God, I know, right? Okay, moving on.
All right, so Russ and Pal. We learn early in the tell-all that Pal is essentially living in Miami now, but Russ is still in Oklahoma. During some group conversation, Sean asks Russ if he feels guilty about making Pal leave her family, but he doesn't really. He feels bad that she doesn't have her family around, but it was ultimately her decision. However, he feels very different about something else that was basically her decision, the topless photos. They asked the other cast members what they thought about it, and the general consensus from everybody is that it really wasn't a big deal because it was a job and business is business. The only dissenters were really Brett and Alexi, who basically are the other husbands that would like to have discussed it beforehand. The other issue they discussed on stage was Pal planning to change her name back to her maiden name. She always kind of regretted changing her name to Russ's, since that's not the Colombian way to do things. They tend to do that thing where both parents keep their names and the children have the hyphenated name. Russ thinks they have come to a compromise by having Pal change to a hyphenated name, and then the children will have his name, but Pal doesn't think that this is the deal they agreed to. Russ says that he would not have been upset if she never took his name, but her wanting to change it now after she's had it for like a couple years, he finds pretty insulting. So let's just start with the name change thing. So how many people in your circle, what percent change their name when they get married?
I would say almost all. And I would say that my sister is actually one person that did not change her last name. And it's actually really hilarious. She's like, the world doesn't need another Chan. That was her reasoning for not changing her last name. We do have a pretty unique last name. I don't really know anyone else I've never come across anyone else who's had her last name. But it's one of those things where my parents they're very traditional. They were insulted that my sister didn't change her last name. And I was like, why do you all care? It's like you're moving away from the family name. I don't know why you were so offended by it, but my parents were really offended by it. And so they kind of looked at me and were like, you will change your last name when you're getting married, right? And I was like, no, I probably won't because, and I think this is the challenge for anyone who, and I'm not saying this applies to me necessarily, but anyone who professionally has their name on something, exactly. It is difficult. And I'm thinking specifically of people who have published papers. So if you have a published paper, it's very difficult to get your name changed for any kinds of citations. And so things like that, it's professionally for me, unless I was really trying to reinvent myself professionally, maybe then I would change my last name to get kind of a new start on things. But it's no, everything that's associated with me professionally is tied to my last name. So why am I going to change it? But for personal reasons, I would be okay with it. I don't have any opinions in terms of social norms or things like that. It's traditional for my parents and so I would consider it just because, it, makes them happy and doesn't really bother me any. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just funny because most of the women I know who get married, it tends to be an assessment of the two names.
Yeah, which one's better?
Yeah.
Oh, that's totally my situation, which I hated my last name growing up. I thought it was super bizarre. And that's part of the reason why I was like, yep, any last name, anyone at all. And there were a couple guys that I dated that had just awful last names. Those are the ones that I seriously thought about, like, I don't really want that name.
No, your last name's fine because it's unique, but not like you can read it. You don't have to. How do you say that again? You can say it. But again, there's not a ton of them.
Okay, so my last name is incredibly phonetic, right?
Yeah.
3 graduations. They mispronounced it 2 out of the 3 graduations that I've had.
Oh, right. That's because you have too many. Yeah, I get it. I'm with it. Okay.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
But it's funny because my parents, specifically my dad, was not the same way. He was so for me and my brother, when we got married, both of them changed their name to our name. But my sister, when she got married, she did not change her name because her husband's name was a major
Terrible.
downgrade. Just one of those ones where it's one of those names where you don't even, like, if somebody asks you what your name is over the phone, like, who's this order for? You just spell it. Like, you don't even try to, like, say it and then spell it. You just spell it. So she didn't. And it was funny because my dad was not offended. My dad was like, of course you kept your name. Our name is awesome. So why would you change it to a different one?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, it does make a difference for the children, right? That's one thing that's one benefit I could say because you mentioned the one for not changing the name. Again, it depends on how professionally involved you are. Like when I got married, my ex had not done anything. She actually started using my name on papers before we were married, knowing that like once we were married, she was going to change the name and like had to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's published papers too. So is she changing her last name after the divorce? Like what's that process?
Because the other benefit of changing your name is it does help when your last name matches your children's last names.
Yes.
It makes life a lot easier.
Right. That was the one thing. They did not want to hyphenate my niece's name because it sounds weird.
It would sound weird.
I'm not going to lie. It sounds weird. Kind of, my last name stuck to Chan. It's odd. So, but at the same time, they really pressured my sister when she was at the hospital when she just had my niece saying, it's going to be bad like when you're at daycare or school and you have to do a pickup and your name doesn't match any part of her last name. And so she felt somewhat pressured to make a hyphenate last name. So poor thing has a hyphenated last name. Oh. It's weird. Her last name is weird. My last name was weird enough. Add a Chan to the end of it. Oh God.
Yep. So yeah, but it is weird. It is weird to change your mind and go back.
Yes.
I can see Russ being sensitive about that.
Yes, because it's like, well, okay, this is how I would take it. Like, what in our relationship has changed that you feel this way now? And, it's hard not to take that personally. Like, you're not in the same place you were before. So what's changed? Are things worse? Do you see see a future without me? Like, all these kind of doubts, I could definitely see that.
And I thought Pal kind of had an answer that was, I guess, reasonable. Because her thing was, I'm starting to be professional. I'm going to be out there professionally. And clearly your family doesn't want to be connected to that in any way. So I'll take their name off of it. And I'll use my other name.
Well, let's be real here. Publishing a paper is much different from having a stage name as a model.
Right.
So if she wants to go by a different last name, yeah, she could.
That part's true. Point taken.
Oh, goodness. All right. Last up, we pretty much have the Danielle and Mohamed show.
Yeah, I think I can go get a drink or something while you do this.
Oh, I know, right? So Mohamed comes out fighting, saying that he's here to defend himself. So Mohamed says he didn't know enough about Danielle before he got married. Danielle says that Mohamed has changed. He used to be affectionate and he worked. He came over here and wasn't affectionate and he didn't work. Danielle reveals she didn't want to tolerate being mistreated. However, she has had the cops called on her 10 times. She claimed that he knew about the financial situation before he came over here because he had bought shoes for her daughter before he came to the U.S. Everybody jumps on Danielle for not giving Mohamed the boot at the first sign of his true colors. And Alexei defends? Danielle and says, she didn't do it because she's weak.
Sean takes a quick poll, and only 3 people on stage believe that Mohamed actually loved Danielle. Mohamed tries to explain himself and his relationship with Louisa, but no one is really letting him talk without cutting him off, and they just bombard him with questions like, if you were unhappy, why didn't you just leave? Mohamed later reveals that he was never intimate with Louisa, and they were truly just friends. They never even kissed. Once he found out that she was using him to get on TV, he cut her off. He also tells us that Greasy was someone he went to the beach with 4 or 5 times, and he also never kissed her or did anything with her. Danielle tries to say that working so much had stressed her out, and Mohamed wasn't helping. Mohamed claims that he had a good life in Tunisia, and he only came here for Danielle. Danielle tells us that she still uses Mohamed's last name on her social media because it's her legal name. Mohamed tells us the reason why he left Danielle was because his life was absolutely miserable. He felt she had lied about herself, her finances, and her criminal records. Danielle admits that she passed a bad check and stole a credit card and purchased groceries with it. Danielle then pulls an envelope from the folds of the couch and serves Mohamed with papers for an annulment. Mohamed just looks at the papers and says, these are fake because there isn't a stamp or a signature. Danielle says, oh, it's just a copy and he'll be served with official papers sometime soon. Sean then asks about their sex life. We find out that they had sex before the wedding and after at some point. Mohamed says he doesn't really want to talk about it, but then continues to talk about it, saying there was a problem. He talks in circles around the problem, but claims that Danielle threw a tantrum in front of her kids and told him that she wanted her sex tonight and threatened to call to immigration if he didn't agree. Sean asks Danielle if that's what happened, and instead of Danielle saying yes or no, she then tells us that Mohamed had told people she smelled and that she had peed on him. Mohamed nods his head in agreement. He tries to explain why he doesn't want to have sex with Danielle, as Sean keeps trying to cut him off, saying she just doesn't want to know. Sean asks if he's gay. Mohamed casually denies it. Danielle tells us that she wants Mohamed to leave the country because he doesn't deserve to be there. Danielle then starts crying, and Mohamed starts to taunt her, saying that people are used to seeing her crying and no one cares. Mohamed says that she is great at looking like a victim and getting people to feel sorry for her. Mohamed is frustrated because there's so much he could reveal about Danielle, but there isn't enough time. Mohamed claims that he tried to find jobs and that he has applied to thousands of jobs, but his reputation precedes him thanks to Danielle blasting him online and saying that he's a scammer and a cheater and not to give him money. But his story doesn't hold up because Danielle says that she keeps defending him online, which I completely believe. Mohamed says that Danielle has something wrong with her and she needs to see a doctor, and Danielle walks off. All hell breaks loose as the women think he stepped over the line. He accuses people of being drunk, namely his side of the couch. He gets frustrated and walks off. He tells us that he had protected Danielle for the last 2 years. He elaborates and says that she smells and he has tried to advise her on that. And then he says that all of that only covers 10 to 20% of the reason why he left. Oh God, so there was a lot of stuff. And I try to limit it to the things that we learned new on the tell-all, right? But even then, there was a lot of stuff. Okay, what I gathered, because they kept on trying to incorporate everybody else, because I think they quickly realized that everybody else were just spectators. But what I gathered is that we had, on Team Danielle, we had Melanie and Pau. On Team Mohamed, we had Devar and Alexi. And then Team No One was Lauren, Russ, and Kyle. And then everybody else kind of didn't really say anything.
Everybody else kept their mouth shut. Right. Yeah, so it was funny because I called it, I went with the Reddit thing. Everybody sucks here was.
Yes.
And Alexi was kind of there too. It was all a spectrum.
Right. Because even Devar, even though he was kind of Team Mohamed, like, let's be real here. Devar and Mohamed almost got in a fight later on because when Mohamed accused them all being drunk, like, Devar took that super personally because, let's be real here, who was Mohamed probably talking about? Probably Devar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I believe it that Devar was drunk, and especially kind of knowing what we know now about Devar, you know, like, he was doing some of these things drunk, and so I wouldn't be surprised in the least if Devar was drunk. And
right, but it was a weird thing to go after because if we're talking about who was drunk on that stage,
Yeah.
It was Devar and maybe Kyle. Two people that were either on his side or leaving him alone. So why did you go with everybody's drunk. All these drunk people are yelling at me. Why did you do that?
Yeah, exactly. Because the people who I don't think he would consider drunk were the ones that were jumping on him, which were Melanie, Pow, and then even Lauren a little bit.
Yeah, mostly Melanie, I think.
Yes, definitely Melanie. Right. Which we'll talk about this in the power rankings.
Right.
It made her ranking slide after this
tell-all. I did think that was funny though. That was my favorite part of the whole tell-all. Besides, the I Want My Sex Tonight is in the like pantheon of all the things, right?
Sure.
In the 90 Day Fiancé quote, power rankings, it's really high up there.
Yes.
But like when she was trying to calm Devar down. And then Mohamed, again, can't read the room and said something bad about her. And she was like, he's going to kick your ass. You shut up.
Right. Yeah, I definitely think that is something that evades Mohamed. And I don't know if it's his kind of like the language barrier or not. But he does, I think, struggle with kind of reading the room. Like I think he has a hard time picking up on kind of social cues sometimes.
Sure. Yeah. So he does. It's not clear to him who is on my side and who's not on my side.
Right.
And so in that, the people who were already not on his side stay off his side, and he turns everybody that was on his side against him, and then is angry that everybody's coming after him. And it's like, you went one by one and pissed off every single person. Of course, they're all against you right now.
Right. And I just, it did not help that. He should have read when Sean was saying, like, okay, we don't need to hear this. We don't need to hear this. She was like trying to shut down this conversation because she knew it was getting ugly. And he just kept on talking away. It's just like, oh my gosh, stop while you're ahead.
Right. Well, he has a real problem with feeling like everything he wanted to be heard hasn't been heard yet.
Yes.
And that continuously, why are you cutting me off? We were having this conversation. You didn't let me finish. I need to finish now. And it's like, well, are you sure you want to finish? Because I think it's going to make things worse. And then he finishes and it makes things worse. And you're like, well, why did you feel like you had to finish, Mohamed? Why did you feel like you had to finish?
And I think it doesn't help that he had that mentality. Like, he started off saying he's here to defend himself. So if you come in with that kind of mentality, it's like, if people are still not on your side, you're going to feel like your job isn't done yet. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's why he felt like he had to keep talking. People aren't on my side. I'm not done defending myself. Because once you kind of see where I'm coming from, you will now be on my side.
Oh, yeah. He definitely always thought that. That's very clear. Even though everybody ends up not on his side.
Right. Yeah. Including you?
No. Danielle's horrible. Like, yeah. And that's the thing, that's why it was weird that he came in there like, I'm here to defend myself. Whereas the whole season up to this point, he looked better than Danielle.
He did. Yeah. She is crazy. He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. And the thing was, is if it was somebody who was just a little bit less crazy, him on his part, right? Yeah. If they could stop and rationally explain what was going on, they'd be like, they fooled each other. And that's where basically Lauren was coming from. She probably had the best read on what was going on. Is they were there to fool each other, and they both got caught up. You play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Right.
Because they were both trying to pull one over on the other person. And it's super frustrating to me, Danielle's way of being like, of doing this and scheming and manipulating, but being like, oh, gee, I just did the thing. Like when she stole the credit card.
Yeah.
And was like, oh, well, gee, times are hard. And it was in the mail and we got groceries. And I'm like, no, you stole a credit card. That didn't accidentally end up in your mail.
Yeah. No one accidentally threw the,
accidentally took it to the grocery store and bought groceries with it. You spent money you knew wasn't yours. That's called stealing.
Yeah.
And I very highly doubt that she didn't take steps to make sure that card ended up in her mailbox.
Interesting. But I kind of feel like at the end of it, I could see how people who maybe are a little bit more empathetic than me could, look at that and be like, oh, well, she was on hard times. Like, how else was she going to feed her family? And kind of ignoring the fact that she still broke the law. Like, that's stealing from someone else.
It was. I mean,
so now you're going to put it on someone else because that's a person behind that.
You wouldn't think twice about it if it was your credit card.
Yeah.
Right? You'd call your credit card company and be like, I didn't buy these groceries. And the credit card company is going to go after that person. They don't. I think everybody's had that happen, right? Everybody's had fraudulent charges on their credit card.
Sure.
And that doesn't just go away. I mean, if they can find out who it is, they prosecute that person. And you as a credit card holder don't get to say, well, gee, can we look at how hard of a time they were going through? So, I mean.
Well, they needed groceries to feed their kids, so I guess it's okay. We'll just give them the money.
Yeah. People generally don't do that. Because,
no, it's not happening.
I don't blame. I don't know. It's really hard. I don't like to blame people in poverty for being in poverty, but Danielle is a bad example for that.
Right. And I feel like she kind of also looked at the Mohamed situation like, this guy's going to help us get out of poverty.
Yes.
She
absolutely did.
And so because he wasn't holding up his end of the bargain for her, and she had said this a couple times in the tell-all, because he didn't get a job, she was extra stressed because now she has another mouth to feed. Mm-hmm. And, this was supposed to be better, but now it's not. It's worse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's where he was coming from at the beginning. He said when Melanie thought, he said, you don't owe me.
Oh, right.
Or something like that. You owe me. And what he had really said was, you don't own me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was getting at. Because she was like, no. I brought you here. I get to tell you what to do. You need to go get a job because we need more money. It's like, no. Because that's not the point of the visa. There's a reason you can't work when you first get here. There's a reason you have to earn your green card. You're supposed to. You do actually owe them, because when you sponsor that visa, you take them out of a country, you put them in another country where they cannot work, and you are financially responsible for them. You actually do owe them, which Melanie had said something like that. She doesn't owe you anything. It's like, actually, I think she kind of does.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if he claims that his life in Tunisia was so good.
Mm-hmm. Now, he did not have a good answer for why he didn't go back to Tunisia.
Right.
Why now, or a year and a half ago, or when things went bad, why he didn't go back to Tunisia. Yeah. That's the one thing he just does not have a reasonable answer for that matches everything else that he's saying.
But at the same time, do I believe his life was better in Tunisia? Absolutely. But just with Danielle. Once he was away from Danielle, is his life generally better than Tunisia? Well, maybe it's kind of the same at this point.
Right. Yeah, I believe that. I couldn't. Because whenever I watch it, I try to picture myself living with Danielle, and I just am like that. I mean, I understand. I get where every time I try to picture myself in that house living with her, I'm like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I would get out of there as quick as I could.
And honestly, it's not even just Danielle. It's that entire situation. You're living with Danielle. You're sharing small space. Like, what? Do they have a 2-bedroom place? And there's 4 people living there, not including you. So the 3 girls, adult women, practically, they were all 16 or older, are all sharing a 1-bedroom. And then you have, like, Danielle, who has her own room, surrounded by dolls and other weirdo knickknacks.
Yeah.
You got that situation. There's financial hardships. Your electricity is going off because someone didn't pay the bills. It's like, that sounds like a terrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, even like we've mentioned it, the things, there's busted doorknobs. There's like things all around that are just like, because correct me if I'm wrong, didn't those girls get out as soon as they could too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They even said, like, if Mohamed moves back, we're out. But I think even now she's living with, like, it's still a full house. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Okay, let's move on to our power ranking. So we have 12 individuals on this season. We don't necessarily group them by couples. And we'll start off with best.
Yeah.
Favorable.
Yes, most favorable.
Most favorable to the worst.
To the worst, yes. Yeah. We do this. We always give the forewarning. Generally, we're pretty close together. I think this one is. I don't think we're going to be right on par with everyone. I think we'll be close, but sometimes we do it, and it's like we do like 12 names, and like 10 of them are exactly the same place. But
yeah, I think we'll have some variation here, especially because towards the top, it's kind of like, maybe you saw a little something, weighted it a little bit more than I did or something.
Sure.
All right. Number 1.
My number 1 was Noon.
Okay, mine was too.
Okay. So far, so good. All right.
Yep.
She just, everything, she had something she wanted. It was a totally reasonable thing to want.
Right.
I didn't feel like she pushed or manipulated or anything. She just said what she wanted. They talked it out like a good couple.
It was a conversation.
It was conversation.
Yes.
It was a two-way thing. She put her family first. I mean, it wasn't a selfish thing that she wanted to do. So I can't even really think of anything that she did that I was really down on or negative about.
Right. I agree. Like, I think she handled everything the way that you ideally would want to handle it, right? Have a conversation with your partner. Talk out the pros and cons. And I mean, I think another thing that puts her towards the top is that she is always thinking about, Kyle's relationship with his family. Like, can we please meet with your mom? Can we try to make things better? And just continuing that, trying for the reconnection. Now, it doesn't always work out, but I mean, you can't say for a lack of trying, which if Kyle left his own devices, let's be real here, he wouldn't have tried.
Right. That's true.
Okay.
All right.
Number 2.
Daya?
I also had Daya as number 2.
Oh, all right. Similar things. She had things she wanted. She was reasonable. They talked. A vast improvement out of the edit or the actual behavior from last time. But like we talked about earlier, they really wanted to make the conflict between Daya and Brett's mom a thing. And she just wouldn't let it happen. And she didn't let it happen. And so it wasn't a thing. And there's a reason their story was so boring.
Right, and that they were barely on it. Yeah, and I felt bad for Daya, like some of the things that she was going through.
Sure.
It's obvious, I think, especially after this season, that she really is in it for family. She really does love Brett. They want to have a baby. They're trying to progress and grow their family. You cannot blame her or accuse her of being a gold digger or a green card grubber at this point. Right. And that was kind of like, those are the two things that kind of villainized her first season.
Sure. Right. And it gave a little bit more context because the other thing, too, is like, where are my flowers? What about my ring? And we kind of got to no, her personality is just, it's straightforward. And, they kind of was like, oh, yeah, I can see that that's just the way she is. Whereas it's your introduction. All right. Number 3 for me is Alexi.
Okay, we finally
diverge.
Yes, but I have a feeling our 3 and 4 might be swapped.
It might be. So yeah, he was all about family. He was cool with his family. I didn't like some of the ways he handled what was going on, like during the wedding. So that's what knocked him down below the first 2. But he's a chill dude.
Yeah,
like, he's just trying to do the best he can, and so I just like him.
I really like the guy. We kind of said if I could guarantee I had a son like Alexi, I would maybe change my mind about wanting to have kids. He seems like a great son. Apparently not the best of a friend, just for like abandoning his friends. Also, Lauren said something that kind of made sense in the tell-all. She said that Alexi can be cranky. And especially after kind of seeing him at the wedding, he definitely seems like one of those, I don't want to say moody, but kind of brooding types. Like, there's something definitely clearly wrong, but he doesn't necessarily, say what it is. But then he gets over it rather quickly. So you're just kind of like, okay, so you just kind of take that as you're kind of cranky or moody. So I could see that. But, I mean, people, they just get that way, like you're hungry, you're tired. It's like, as long as you're not doing terrible things in those conditions, like, I'll let you have it. I'll let you have it every once in a while, right? So Alexi was my number 4.
Okay.
My number 3 was actually Kyle. So Kyle, I kind of felt like, he's trying the best, and definitely by far, well, maybe not by far, because we still have Daya and Brett, but definitely one of the couples that worked the best together. Their communication skills, kind of considering what would be in the best interest for both of them. They weren't like Russ and Pao, where it's like, okay, my best interests lie in this country, yours best lie in this location. Let's just split up for a while, even though we're still together.
Yes.
You know, it was kind of like Kyle was just trying to keep them together physically. And so
let's
that
move
meant
halfway
sacrifices.
in between Portland and Thailand. Let's just live in like Fiji, and that'll be fine, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate that he was willing to make some sacrifices for Noon as well.
Yeah, Kyle was my 4. So I put him below Alexei just because he's a little bit like whiny about it, and he kind of had the ideas of, oh, in Thailand, I don't know anything there, I'm scared, it might be dangerous, and I was like, So just for that little bit, I knocked him down just below Alexei. So everything else you said is pretty true.
All right, you're number 5.
5 was Brett.
My 5 was Brett too.
Jeez. Oh man, I thought this one was gonna be crazy.
I thought so too.
I mean, he was fine. He had that one thing with Schmitty. He kind of cut him off, right? When the fight started, he was like, done. I mean, there wasn't anything he did crazy bad except his rapping.
Yeah, that's so funny that you should say that. That's also why I knocked him down a few. I was like, the rapping, you can't be in the top 3 for that. Come on.
Right. If he hadn't rapped, he might be even higher. But then there would have been even less of them in the season. So
right, true.
You know, it's kind of a wash.
All right. Number 6.
All right. So based on what you said earlier, I don't think you have Melanie here.
Okay. Yeah.
So Melanie, I like because she reminds me of my family, kind of. In this, like, you got to work. Why aren't you working? You got to work. Get a job. Let's go. Let's make money. And it was funny because she even did that when, you know, they talked about Pao and doing topless for her job. She was like, but it's a job. You know, I have a job. Get a job. It was for work. Of course. Obviously.
Oh, it's for work? Okay. Yes. Make that money.
Yeah. But I don't know. I like how she doesn't sugarcoat things. You know exactly where you stand with Melanie.
Oh,
like, you don't have to be going at it. Did she go a little hard at Mohamed? Yeah, she went a little hard at Mohamed. And I actually thought she skipped over a lot of stuff that Danielle was doing and kind of went after Mohamed. Like, you conveniently ignored a lot of what Danielle did.
Yeah.
But I guess just her straightforward nature was where I put her there for.
Sure. Okay, so my number 6 was actually Devar. And I'm not saying that Devar didn't do bad things this season. I didn't super agree with him kind of giving his little sister money when him and Melanie had kind of agreed on one amount, and then he kind of appeared to have given her more than what he had agreed upon. And then he just kind of consistently says, you know, like, I'm going to keep on giving my family money. And when he says my family, he's not talking about Melanie and Hunter, which we actually didn't see much of this season at all.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
But I would say that the reason why Devar does these questionably bad things is because he has a lot of love for his family, you know? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's like he really cares for his family. He wants to take care of his family. And it's like, yeah, you really need to come to an agreement with your wife and not come off as like a liar or, you know, going against what she says and like ignoring what you've kind of compromised on. But I mean, he's doing it out of love for everyone. Okay.
So we'll get to my thoughts on Devar when I get to Devar. I mean, he's not that much slower, but he's a little bit less.
Right.
Okay. So my number 7 then is Lauren.
Okay.
Because she has a unfortunate habit or way of making stressful situations more stressful by adding more pressure onto them.
Right.
Like, throwing a huge wedding party is hard. You don't also have to make that the defining thing that will decide the rest of your futures. Like, it is just a party. Let's relax.
Right.
And it's hard enough as it is. So she tends to overcomplicate situations and add so much more stress than there needs to be.
Yeah, definitely. That's also my reasons why Lauren is where she is on my list, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But before I have Lauren, I actually have Russ. And I don't know, like, I think he has handled it the best he can handle it, given his personality, his family, and who he's dealing with. You know, like, I can't picture how he could do it better that wasn't true to kind of who he is. And I feel like I relate more to Russ because I feel like my family is a little bit more conservative and traditional. And so if I put myself in Russ's shoes, I don't know if I would really, you know, think about things or do things much differently, which necessarily isn't the right thing, but I mean, it's my rankings and I relate to Russ. But I kind of feel like, you know, he, without explicitly telling her what to do, told her his views on it, you know, and she's the one who kind of made it out to be so much worse because his views weren't her views. And I feel like Russ was very careful about telling her explicitly not to be naked, not to do this. Like, everything that he said negatively about it was, you didn't discuss this with me. We didn't talk about this before. It feels like you try to hide this from me and go behind my back because you weren't telling me that this was what was going on. So I felt like he was really careful about how he framed it. And so, you know, he's trying to do what's right, but also kind of not completely roll over, you know, and just go along with anything. So, yeah.
Well, another one we'll talk about when I get to Russ.
Okay.
So my number 8 is Devar.
Okay.
My number 8 is Devar, just because I put a little more weight into his deceptive, I don't know if it's deceptive or not straightforward conversations about the money and what's he going to give to his family. She was, you know, Sure. It almost seemed like a lot of the situations were her being like, well, are you going to give her the money, this much money or this much money? And he's like, yes. You're like, that's not an answer. What are you doing? Can you please just tell me what the hell is going on? And so as much as I ranked Melanie higher because she is straightforward, Devar is not straightforward. You do not know where you stand on him. And he is a very charming dude. But
he is. Maybe his charms worked on me.
His charms, yeah. And I just feel like he kind of turns on the charm when he doesn't want to answer your questions. And so he leaves things up in the air. And that kind of drives me nuts.
I can see that. His charm's working on me more so than you also.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that. All right. So next on my list I have is Lauren. So Lauren, to me, like, she's not a terrible person. She didn't do anything wrong other than stress out everyone around her by being overly dramatic literally about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like, oh, you're annoying. You're further down. Sorry.
Right?
Yeah.
All right. But I didn't think she was as bad as my number 9, who is Russ.
Okay.
Because it's funny because I feel like he kept putting on this one thing in front of the camera where he was like, we didn't discuss it. These are my preferences. But every once in a while, he'd let it slip. And he'd say something like, I didn't give my consent.
Yes, that is true. He did say that.
And things like that, where he was basically like, I should have been able to tell you not to do that, and you should have just not done it. It wasn't a discussion. It was, I get veto power over this. And he wanted veto power over a lot of things. And I did not like the way he handled the potential impact of him not being the breadwinner anymore. He was like, I don't know who I am anymore if I don't make more money. And so those things made me go a lot lower. I feel like he was trying, but he wasn't keeping it as much. And granted, now he's still higher than Powell right now.
Oh God, yes.
So between the two of them, Team Russ, but I didn't think he handled it as good as he could have.
Right. Okay, so next up I have is Melanie. And the reason why she's as far down on my list as she is because I would say that for the most part, her and Devar didn't really have that much new stuff going on this season. It was mostly about, the drama with Melanie's sister and Devar's, family and him sending money to the family. So it was really like, I think Melanie would have ranked much, much higher if she had not been like sticking her nose in everybody else's business on the tell. And you know how I hate that, right? That is the reason why I hate Rebecca of Rebecca and Zied. It's just like, mind your own business, stay in your own lane.
In your lane.
Like, for a tell-all, like, it's not necessary. We have a host, You know, if you're asked for your reaction, sure, but she was jumping on Mohamed. You know, it just felt like she was jumping on everyone, like when given the opportunity to. And it's just like, oh, Melanie, sit down.
Sure. I guess this particular one, it didn't strike me as bad as like Rebecca and Zied in that one, in their season.
Yeah.
Because it was like, man, if Melanie didn't jump up and say something, they would have just been Danielle and Mohamed talking for like, what was it, an hour and a half? Like, 100, 75 minutes out of these 90 would have been just Danielle and Mohamed talking to each other. And I was like, so I didn't notice it as much, but it looks like we have the same bottom three.
Yes, definitely.
And I'm going to go ahead and guess that we have the same number 10.
Maybe.
Mine's Pal.
Maybe. Nope, we do not.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. Mine's Pal. I mean, she did so much. It was doing this, hiding. That's the thing about it. She did, and Russ made that point. She did hide that she took the topless pictures because she knew it would make him mad. And so that's kind of like, that was kind of like, if you went and said, no, if I asked me to do topless pictures, I'm going to do topless pictures. That's the end of the discussion. It's my body. And then when they come back, be straightforward about it. Yeah, I did some pictures where I had a hand bra. Like, too bad. But they're trying to hide it from him. They're trying to finagle this big move to Miami. All for what we keep discussing over and over again is not a job. It is signing up with an agency that might be able to get you gig work. Mm-hmm. And so, just, a lot of it, just all of that.
Okay. The reason why Pao is so far down on my list is Pao doesn't want to be a couple. It's pretty obvious that she just wants to be her own independent self. She wants to do whatever the fuck that she wants to do. She's really selfish, and Russ is just clearly along for the ride. I do think she wants to have a partner. I don't think dating necessarily interests her, but she wants to do whatever she wants to do. And I just feel like, when you're in a partnership with someone, it doesn't quite work that way. You have to consider someone else's feelings. Does that mean that person can control you? No. But I think through anything that she did this season, like, she did not consider Russ at all. When she decided, I want to move to Miami. Oh, Russ has a job somewhere else. Okay, well, I consider it because it affects me, but I don't consider how Russ would feel about moving here.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I
got the impression that she just felt like, it's my turn. You had your turn already. It's my turn now.
We're going to do whatever I want to do. Well, I want to do this.
And you so how much of that is she felt like up until this point, they were just doing whatever Russ wanted to do. And so she was like, nope, it's my turn now.
Well, if that's the case, then season whatever one that they were on, maybe Pal would have ranked higher. But this Happily Ever After season, she is super selfish. So that's why you are really close to the bottom for me. So she was my number 11. So kind of backtracking because she was your number 10. My number 10 was Mohamed. And God, it's one of those things where Mohamed has flaws. I feel like a lot of his flaws are just him and his deficiencies in being able to read other people, reading the room. In terms of doing things maliciously, I kind of feel like it's hard to tell if he's trying to do things maliciously or not. If he was really truly being truthful about his relationship with Louisa, his relationship with Greasy, it's like you could argue that the only thing he really did was try to escape Danielle.
Yeah, so Mohamed's my 11.
Yeah.
And he probably would have been 10 before the tell-all.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
But the tell-all moved him down to...
Yes, it was ugly.
It is that stuff, throwing out personal stuff that did not need to get thrown out.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
It did not, change much except, it didn't elucidate anything, but it was gross.
Yes.
And so that's what I was like, I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know that it's malicious because I feel like in order to believe malicious, you have to care about what other people think or feel. or how this is going to impact them. And I don't think he does. He just says what he wants to say. Talk about somebody who's selfish. He's a very selfish person.
Oh, sure. Uh-huh.
Like, and so whatever, if this is going to make me look good, then I'm going to say it. And why are you crying? This isn't, stop crying, because I can't even consider what your feelings are or how this impacted you, because I'm right and I need to be right. And so, like I said, for the rest of the season, before the tell-all, I think he looked kind of good. He looked like the reasonable one. He looked like he was escaping a bad situation and just doing whatever it could to get there and befriending whoever it took to get there. But then it got here and it didn't all add up. And he attacked everybody else. And it just, I don't know, very, very, way too defensive for me.
Yeah, agreed on that. Okay, so I think we both agree on our.
I mean, this is where I started. 12. This is where I started with my list. This is where I put my list from.
Yes, me too. Yeah, actually I started with the bottom 3, and then I kind of went top down. Because I thought the bottom 3 were somewhat easy.
Sure.
Like, but then, going top down. So Danielle, she is a bad situation all around. I can't imagine any one of these people that came to Danielle's defense would ever want to be in the same situation Mohamed was in.
That's true.
Let's even forget about the whole, stinky sex that Mohamed is throwing out there. Let's forget that. No one wants to be in a situation where they are stuck in a stressful financial situation with someone who has clearly questionable ethics regarding their financial situation, having to, support multiple minors, like 3 other minors in a small space. Your credit is being used because their financial situation is so terrible. And it's like, I don't understand why everybody is kind of getting on Mohamed where, if you really loved her, this would be okay. You would have worked it out. Because if you think about what the top reason for, couples breaking up, getting divorced, it's always finances, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I 100% actually, of all the things to believe Mohamed about, I believe that she severely misled him about the financial situation. Sure. Severely. And it, to the point where, and we mentioned this earlier, it seems to me like she went and found a husband to get herself out of this financial situation. And she was mad that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
That was her goal. Her goal wasn't love any more than his was, right? If you loved him, you would have made it work. And you add on top of all that, situational stuff, someone who, and I believe him when he says this, is constantly screaming at you, blocks you from leaving the door during an argument where she's irrationally yelling at you, won't let things go. Even the relationship itself, if he wasn't living there, would have been a, I hate the phrase, but a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
Just hearing her talk when he's trying to talk about the divorce, right? And she's like, oh, okay, let's go sign the divorce papers. And she brings out a letter and is like, Mohamed, you promised me when we were the thing. He was like, we're signing the divorce papers.
Yes,
what are you talking about?
So far back.
This is we're so far past that.
Yeah. It's got to be incredibly frustrating. And so I don't think anyone would want to be in this situation. So it's just kind of like, Danielle, I don't know what kind of thing she would have to do to kind of get her life on track. But it's just like, this isn't it. Dwelling on what you can't change, blaming someone else.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing too, even from the beginning. And she went back to the annulment because that's frustrating too, because we had talked about it. If you just want to move on and fix your life, the divorce is the only way to go.
Right.
If you're more concerned about punishing him than helping yourself, by all means, get the annulment. But that is clearly what she wanted to do. She was more focused on hurting him than she was on fixing herself and her family and her daughter. She has 3 daughters in that house. My God.
I know. Oh, such a bad situation. All right. So that pretty much wraps up the season. Did you have a life lesson?
Read the room, I guess. I didn't write it down, but now that we talked about it, you have to, when things get heated, you have to be able to take a step back and not lash out at the people who are trying to defend you.
Right. That's so true. Okay, so my life lesson, also inspired by Mohamed, just never talk about the negative aspects of your sex life in a public forum. It makes you look like the ass. Yeah. And
it's a cheap shot.
Yeah, cheap shot, makes you look terrible, it makes you look like the jerk. Does it make us kind of look sideways at Danielle and be like, gross? Yeah, maybe just a tiny bit. But that's nothing in comparison to how gross we think you are now.
Right.
Yeah, so don't air out your dirty laundry like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially that kind of dirt, like especially like that. Like, yeah. Well, and because I mean, you get the impression that he wanted people to think, or was trying to frame it as, "Oh, I was concerned about her health."
Right.
But you shouldn't be bringing up health issues in a forum like that either.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. I think what he was really trying to get at was he was trying to defend the reason why he wasn't affectionate and physical with her, and if he can bring up like a justification why, then it's like, okay, we understand why you do not want anything to do with Danielle physically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, we will be taking a break from Classic, probably until at least Love After Lockup season is over. And, we never know
how long
when these things are going to last. Yeah. So, until further notice, we will be just releasing our podcast late Monday night that will cover... I wanted to say before the 90 days. The Other Way and Happily Ever After, the current season.
Yes. Yeah. And,
yes.
Yep. One big long episode to cover both, just like we've been doing.
Right. Okay. So we will see you all on Monday then.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.